Okay, guys, we're live here today for our Fife Property Blog episode 2 with Richard Cook, the Lettings Director of Fife Properties. David Marr is our special guest today from Shepherd Surveyors. We're going to talk about home reports fundamentally today and what impact that has on houses, maybe the economy itself and the overall housing market. And if you've got any questions for David from Shepherds or any questions for ourselves, more than happy to take these questions if you want to put them in the comments box. And we'll go through them. Absolutely. So how's things for you, David, at Shepherds? How are things going?
It's still a busy spell. Obviously, when we came back from furlough time, what was that, end of June, beginning of July, and it's never really stopped. July, August, still going, September through to October. So long may it continue. But it's certainly been a busy 3 months anyway for us.
Yeah. What about yourself, Richard? How's the Lettings division? How was Lettings in lockdown and how's Lettings now?
Do you know, throughout lockdown, Lettings was busy throughout. Obviously, we were just restricted with what we could do at a certain point. But throughout, I was keeping in contact with a lot of landlords. There was a lot of people eager to keep, obviously, getting properties on the market. And I still had an abundance of inquiries coming through for people looking to let property. But obviously, for a certain period of time, we were restricted on doing that. But yeah, the demand was still there, and it still is, and it's quite busy at the minute.
I mean, that's been a bit of a challenge when you think about it, considering the COVID situation and the fact that you can't actually do anything, you can't actually get in the door to help anyone.
I had it all there in front of me. It was just not being able to follow through it for a wee while. So when we come out of lockdown and obviously restrictions were lifted, we were able to hit the ground running, and we were really busy. So and we still are.
Okay, so David, in terms of home reports, I mean, how did that affect you and your business with doing home reports? I mean, what did lockdown do?
Pretty much shut us down overnight on the home report front. So yeah, that was pretty much just an overnight change from being busy on the Friday. The lockdown thing happened at the weekend, did not? So the Monday coming back, there was just nothing happening. And yeah, that was pretty much it for 12 weeks or whatever it was. But again, as soon as the restrictions were lifted, it came out to a sort of flyer sort of thing. And whether that was pent-up demand or people who are always going to be moving anyway, or people's lifestyles have changed so much in the 3 months. That's basically what's happened. So whether it's people who no longer need to be in the city centre, being in an office day in, day out, they're able to work remotely. That's what we're finding just now, especially for the area I cover, East Nuke, St Andrews, Cooper, etc. A lot of people are moving from the city centres and just wanting a bigger property, maybe rural or sea views, definitely a garden anyway, and they're able to work from home and just take it from there.
Do you think that's a consequence of actually lockdown, that people are realising that it could actually work anywhere else in the world, in the country, if not the world?
Yeah, there's what I'm finding, there's a huge impact on that sort of thing. There's a lot of people saying, that they don't need to be in that office kind of thing with remote working these days. I know from a company as Shepherds, they're trying to do more remote working as well. So everybody's set up, the IT's there. Sometimes you do need that office, to go into to do certain things, but majority of the time you can be remotely working, and it's not every job's the same, but a lot of positions will be the similar. So I think it's maybe here to stay, this remote working, home working, for a while and see what happens.
Yeah. Morning, Andrea. How are you? That's Andrea just saying good morning to everybody.
Morning, Andrea.
So I think personally for me, in terms of the housing market, it's probably a lot to do with broadband now. So a lot of people are actually making broadband a priority to make sure they've actually got the right connection and the right bandwidth in order to do things like this, for example. Because I mean, this would probably never have been heard of before lockdown, but this has now taught us that we're able to do this and stream and actually have a show online. What's your thoughts on that, Richard?
Yeah, it's becoming a bit of the new normal in the day-to-day running of things. And you even see that even when people are looking for property, because everybody's working from home at the minute, they're conscious of broadband connections and how fast they could get a broadband connection and the speed for obviously working from home. So yeah. But the new normal, I think, is what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Morning, Nigel, fellow surveyor there, David. Morning, James. How are you as well? Yeah, okay. So let's talk about home reports and how vital they are. Now, let's talk about the history. So why did home reports come about in the first place, David?
The home report came in the 1st December 2008 was when it was actually originally introduced. Most people that we go to nowadays are familiar with the home report process, but you do get the occasional person who's been in the property for 20 years, first time they've sold their property. It's an absolute minefield, what they've all to do. So basically, the home report is broken down into 3 sections. The property questionnaire is the first part, and that's what the client fills in. So again, it's questions like how long you've owned the property, what the council tax banding is. A lot of it is yes/no questions, just to sort of set the scene for the buyer about the background, how long they've had the property. There's an energy report to show you how energy efficient the building is. That's taken into consideration the type of boiler you've got, insulation. There's quite a lot of factors you take into putting a computer programmer, and it lets you know how energy efficient the property is.
I've always thought the energy report's just a made-up thing.
No, there's like a process involved.
I've always wondered. I've always been intrigued about the energy report, because energy performance certificates tell us how energy efficient our property is at the moment. Yeah. But then it also goes on, does it not, to say how energy efficient our property could be?
The recommendations on how to get there. So whether it's increasing insulation, putting a more modern boiler in, changing the windows. So there are recommendations in there, but a lot of people, if you've got a 4-bedroom property and you're only maybe a 1-person occupant or a 2-people occupant in that property, you don't use as much energy as what the computer programmer expects. As a family home, a family will use it. We always find someone will say, "Oh, it's cheaper to run my property than what the computer says." But it's one of the things. It's an average it's taken sort of thing. So, you'll get the energy report, and you also get the most important part. I would say is a single survey is the third part of the home report. So that's the condition rating and valuations incorporated that into as well. So those sort of 3 parts make up the full home report, and then that part is passed on to all potential or interested buyers right at the start of the process.
Yeah. So Mark actually asking, so how do you upgrade the EPC then to increase the value? I mean, how does the upgrade to the EPC increase that value?
To be honest, I would say it's difficult to prove that an upgraded EPC increases the market value. It might help the saleability, and somebody might say, great, it will be cheaper to run, so I don't mind paying a bit extra premium to secure that property. But for me to say the identical house with a B rating and a C rating is worth more would be very difficult to show the market evidence to suggest that. So
personally for myself, as an estate agent, I kind of think people don't buy it for the EPC. They buy the property primarily because it's location and it's beautiful and it's what they want. The EPC really, I've never really had anybody challenge an EPC and say, "Oh, it's a big problem, I'm not going to buy the property." It's never come into the equation in any house I've ever sold. So I often wonder, why on earth do we have it, or is it just getting forced on us?
It's a government introduction sort of thing. I think it is to help, global warming, climate change, etc. It is to try and improve the energy of the property, etc. sort of thing. So there is a government-backed idea, but the only time I've ever sort of seen someone say something about the energy report is if they're buying, an eco-friendly house, it's specially built, passive house to be A-rated. They're buying it because they're wanting an A-rated property. But most people will accept, like I said, it's all about location, condition, bedrooms, etc. EPC's the tag on at the end, sort of thing.
I think when it's like an E or an F, I think that's where it becomes a fundamental problem, because it indicates typically, that you've maybe got storage heaters, electric.
Yeah, I was going to say it's maybe an old stone built property, single glaze and everything. So a lower energy rating may impact and put people off at that end of the scale.
Yeah.
But I think the average in Scotland's a D rating. So if you're anywhere between a sort of C, D, E, I don't think people really bat an eyelid. So again, obviously, Richard, this might come on to you, but obviously the ratings will change for what the letting of a property will be.
Yeah, I mean that was all obviously postponed due to the circumstances that we're in at the minute. But yeah, they're bringing in obviously minimal banding for the lettings, which is going to cause a problem for some properties.
Is that in just now, or what is that, and when is that?
No, it's been postponed. It was supposed to be in place at the minute, but obviously due to COVID and things, so it needs. I think what they were going to do D minimum.
Yeah.
Which could cause a problem for some rural properties and things as well. But they are going to be offering grants and things to help, obviously, bring properties up to that level.
You can see Emily there. She's an investor and says it is important, the new minimum guidelines, and I absolutely agree with being an investor myself. The last thing you want to do is buy a property that's in E or an F, and then you find that you can't rent it anymore, and you have to upgrade it significantly and spend a huge capital outlay in it.
Yeah, and I've got a lot of rural properties which just are well below that banding. So when it comes into force, they're going to have to really look at what they need to do to bring that up.
So APCs then, David. We've kind of agreed. I mean, here's a controversial one for everybody. I think eventually, at some point in time, EPCs will be the new council tax bandings. What does everybody think about
that? So you're saying if it's an A-rated, it'll be a lower council tax banding?
Absolutely. And you'll be rewarded. I've got a funny feeling this is what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, it's what Richard suggested. Some properties, you just can't get them up to that level.
It will be difficult.
So that it'd be very difficult, I think, to force that on somebody. Say if you've got a rural cottage that's stone built, electric heating, etc. There's no, you can.
There's no cavity fill. There's no,
There's a certain limit to what you can do to it. Are you going to get penalised for that? I think they'll still keep it as who knows?
Controversial, isn't it?
But it's a controversial one. You're thinking a bit ahead, I suppose.
I've heard it in political circles being mentioned.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I did hear that being muted on some of the committees I was on.
I mean, I wouldn't discount any really nowadays, to be honest. But
yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay, so we've got the EPC sorted out. James is commenting. Now, James is an investor. I've only been looking for D and above. I did have one that went from D to C, just off of B after the refurb. So, thanks for that comment, David.
James, a comfortable level there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So that's the EPC sorted out, and then we come on to you talked about the property questionnaire. I mean, it's is that something? Who fills that out, and what is the purpose of it?
Filled out by the owner, or if it's part of an estate, whoever's sort of in charge of that estate. So the purpose is just to give a little bit of a sort of history background to the property sort of thing. So some of the questions will be like, who supplies the utilities just now? So that, if you move, you can quite easily get in with, whatever electricity company is supplying the property to say there's a change of owner, telephone, etc. sort of thing. So it will give you a list of who the current utilities are. If there's been any repairs carried out to the property for anything like dampness, woodworm treatments, anything like that, so that you can look for guarantees. What the council tax banding is, so if it's a D, E, whatever it is, you can do your calculations, see if you can afford to buy that property if you're moving sort of up from what your current rating is. So there's quite a few questions in it, and it's more just really to paint a bit of a scene, a bit of a background to the property for the potential purchaser, so they can read through that and just have a little bit more information on what's been going on with that property in the ownership of the current vendor.
So it's probably just a helpful guide then for the next.
Yeah, I was going to say. So how important is it as part of the whole home report? Because I mean, I've seen home reports in the past where, like you say, executors and things have filled it in and they've not answered any of the questions hardly. So
if you don't know the answers, you've got to just put "don't know" or miss that.
I've seen that a lot.
again, there is an importance to it, but I would still say most people, in my experience, look at the single survey part, which is the condition ratings and the valuation sort of thing. So the property questionnaire and the EPC are a sort of add-on sort of thing, a tag-on at the end, but most people look at that single survey part of the document, and that is what takes preference over everything.
So it's just a helpful guide at the end of the day to show everybody where everything is once they've moved in.
Give every potential purchaser much information right at the start of the process. Before the home report came in, you done all that at the end sort of thing. You know, you'd go in, put your offer in, then get it surveyed. Now it's surveyed at the start. The buyers or potential buyers can do their due diligence and, you know, getting quotations. They can work everything out right at the start of the process before their offer goes in, as opposed to doing it, you know, the other way about sort of thing. So it's changed from that point of view,
And then the most controversial part is the belts and braces assessment of the property. The one you get a lot of feedback about from the potential from the sellers. So take me over the standard classic go-to ones that you always get. What is the go-to reservations that everybody says, or the go-to things that always come up in a home report? Typical staple.
Obviously, as a surveyor, we're acting as a sort of independent party for, at the right at the start, the seller is our client, then it moves on to the buyer being the client when they take ownership. So we're trying to do a job that highlights the negatives of the property, I suppose, whereas the seller who's trying to sell it doesn't really want the negatives highlighted. So it's to try and manage that and say, look, I'm doing my job here. If I think this is something that needs to be highlighted, I've got to highlight it for the incoming purchaser to be aware of. And that's the difficult part, is managing where you can say, yes, it's general maintenance, or no, this is something that needs to be highlighted.
Well, the go-to statements are always going to come up is, in an older style property, it's the inherent woodworm that was there before. That's the classic. Evidence of wood borer infestation there before. Make sure guarantees and warranties are in place. And when I see some buyers see that, they run for the hills immediately, and they think, oh my goodness, the world's going to fall in. I can't buy that house. It's rotten all the way through. The reality is it's inactive from before, because it's been continually sprayed over the years. But miraculously, even the sellers and the buyers think that the hole should disappear when it's actually created by a beetle.
I was going to say, the holes will always be there. And again, we are not timber specialists, so we don't really say, is this active or not? So that's where it's getting the specialist in to say, does this need sprayed again, or is it dormant? You know, that's fine. But again, you've got to consider, if you're looking at a house that's 120, 150 years old, there will be some defects in there. You know, you might be woodworm, a touch of dampness. It's just one of these things where if you buy a 2-year-old house that's got dampness, you know, there's a problem there. So again,
and that's the next emotive subject, damp. And the most dangerous tool you have is your damp meter. the amount of almost could I dare say almost fights? Because you bring your damp meter out and you stick it in the wall, and it's like, my goodness, there's the evidence of damp, and then the controversy starts in between. I've never had any damp in my property. I mean, have you had that before?
That happens, more often than I would like. But again, it's one of these things. Sometimes you go to a property and you can smell the dampness, and you know straight away there's an issue here. Whereas other times you test it and think, oh, there is a bit of damp, but there's no signs of the wallpaper or the paint's not flaking or that. You think, you know, you wouldn't know it was damp unless it was tested. I would say it's my job to try and find something like that to pass it on to the next purchaser. You know, it's one of these things that, is it really impacting market value? No, it's not. So unless it's a major issue, but if it's not impacting market value, it's one of these things that I wouldn't have thought it was a major issue. It's one of these things that, yes, it's there. It may need attended at some stage, but I think some people do get concerned as soon as they see, dampness in the report or woodworm report. They start panicking. It's like, look, get a quotation, see how much it is. If you're talking £500 to sort on a £250,000 market value,
it makes sense to do that. It makes sense to do it.
Exactly, because if it's a £10,000 damp bill, you've got quite a significant issue that needs to be attended to there. So I think all that's to be taken into consideration, but it's difficult sometimes to manage as soon as you've picked it up in survey and highlight it to the seller. It's like, oh my goodness, you found a problem. It might not be that much of a problem, sort of thing. It might just be one of these things. And if you've got the right property in the right location, buyers will accept there's work to be done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I think as well, you often get a case that, it picks up a suspected damp, but it's sometimes because they've had their furniture far too close to the outside wall.
Yeah, it might be an element of condensation.
You have it's condensation more than anything, but it's been continual over a period of time because they've never addressed it or they've never ventilated their house properly. You know yourself, the biggest problem to damp now in condensation is the fact that we've now gone to insulate our houses to the degree that we have no drafts coming through at all now. And does this cause a problem for you?
Yes, I mean, sometimes a lot of problem with condensation, we'll go in and it's somebody maybe drying clothes in a radiator, wet clothes, on a closed horse radiator or something. You come in and say, well, that dampness from your clothes has to go somewhere. It's obviously in the atmosphere. You're not opening a window. So sometimes condensation, a majority of times, caused by lifestyle of the current occupant of the property. You do find that sometimes there is a condensation issue, but if there was ventilation and heating and ventilation to that property, that would clear up, sort of thing. So
Joanna said that you must heat and ventilate the property. Thanks, Joanna.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of landlords, especially, we're finding, are putting in mechanical ventilation these days because they may have properties with student properties with 5 or 6 different students in there.
I've done it.
Yeah. So there we go. So a mechanical ventilation system seems to be a very
which are about £700 to £1,000.
Exactly.
So you spent all that money insulating a property to the point that you're actually now putting a ventilation system in to actually get proper to take all that condensation out.
But when you see some properties have had 5 or 6 students in there for a year, and you go in at the end of the tenancy and there's black mold everywhere, it might cost you like £300 or £400 every year. So maybe a mechanical ventilation in the long term is the way to go. But realistically, if you were living in the property, using it correctly with the heating and ventilation, you should be able to manage that condensation issue. But unfortunately, this is something we do come across fairly regularly.
Yeah, so another one probably that comes up as well is electrics.
Yeah. I would say we don't test the services. We make that clear in our report that we're not electricians, we're not heating engineers, so it is purely a visual inspection we do, sort of thing. So if we feel that there's building regulations always get updated every few years, so properties, unless they're newly built or they're only, I think it was 2016 from memory, the last electrical update was. So unless they're that modern, they won't comply with current regulations. But if you're saying you've got a 10, 12-year-old property, the electrics won't be dangerous in that property. They just won't comply with current regulations. So again, it's to say, like, unless we feel that the electrics are, of a vintage where we're concerned with it, get an electrician, sort of thing. That's the only thing we could do is really pass it over to a specialist to comment on. One of the telltale signs is the old fuse box. When you get the old cartridges, the fuse one. I mean, things like that, they need updated, sort of thing. So by highlighting that as needing updated, but it's whether there's things like hardwired smoke detectors, things like that. I mean, we wouldn't be testing for things like that. So
I think a lot of times, though, when people see these old style fuse boxes, they immediately assume the whole house is needing rewired. Is that kind of your impression? I mean, Richard, do you see that as well? Because I tend to see that quite a lot. When in actual fact, the fuse box to change for another fuse box is what, £400.
A new RCD box is £250, £300.
Yeah, and that's often the case. What it is. But because they see that comment, and you can't really do anything about that, because as you say, you're not an electrical engineer. You're not there to advise people about what they should do. But the reality is, the belts and braces assessment is it's just change the electric box to a new RCD protected. You'll often see that now, you'll see that now in every single rented property, private rented.
Yeah,
Every single box is changed. I mean, we've changed hundreds of consumer boxes, over the years because of the new legislation that came in place for private landlords.
Yeah, you know, and December 2016, we had to go through all our properties. So
But are they testing the full system then when change the box? Yeah. So if they're saying the full system's fine, that's enough for us to say, you know, we've had an electrician who that's their you know, expertise sort of thing. So if they've got an electrical test certificate, the EICR thing, saying it's been tested, the whole system.
That's actually quite a good top tip when you think about it. If you're going to sell your house and it's previously been rented accommodation, we should actually be pointing out that the whole electrical system's been tested previously. You know, that's actually quite a good thing to do.
And again, so we can incorporate that in the report. And again, on the property questionnaire, that's one of the questions, if I remember right. Do you have a certificate of guarantee for?
I think it is in there.
So again, you can incorporate that into the property questionnaire. So again, that sets the scene for all right. The electrics have been tested. You know, that's one thing we don't need to be concerned with at this stage.
So in that part of the report, then, what we're doing is then we're testing the electrics. Well, we're not testing the electrics. We're making sure we're looking at the electrics. We're looking at what else. We're visual inspections of the electrics and making a comment. We're visual inspections of the roof space, making a comment. We're visual inspections of damp, taking meter readings and making a comment. What else? What else is in that part of the report?
There's, I think there's about 18 different elements of the single survey. It's broken down. So you're looking at, you know, roof, walls, windows, floors, decoration, everything. So every element's broken down to it, and it's given a repair category 1, 2, or 3. So 1 is no immediate action. 2 is you know, it's maybe needing work done to it, get a quotation, and 3 is an essential repair, and it needs now. Normally the main things we find for repair category 3 is probably a dampness and timber defect section. That's the one that there could be hidden problems there if it's under the floor, or it could be that if the damp prolongs for any length of time, it could lead to another issue sort of things. That's probably the main one we see as repair category 3 would be the dampness and timber defect section. That's a majority of the sort of maintenance. If you've got slip slates and that, as long as there's no water coming in, again, if it's a 100-year-old property with a slip slate, you know, it's not the end of the world. You know, it's repair category 2. Whereas if you've got a new house with a slip slate or tile, that you know, that needs to be sorted. You know, repair category 2's general maintenance is what you find. Repair category 3, touch wood, something that you won't come across too often, but the main one for that is the dampness section. Yeah,
I mean, repair category 3 is really a warning sign, isn't it? Whereas repair category 2 is a guidance.
Yeah. Whereas repair category 3 means that you really, if it was me selling the property, I'd be advising the vendor to go and get a quotation now for it and see how much it's going to cost, because that's probably impacting market value. Is it worth them doing the work just now and selling it, you know, in a month's time when the work's done, say, and maybe getting the increase in value for doing the work, or do they at least obtain the quotation as part of the seller's pack?
Yeah.
So people know, all right, the dampness is going to be £5,000, or it's going to be X number. So we all know what the figures are to start with. I certainly say repair category 3, it's worth getting a quotation for right at the start of the process. And that way, sometimes it would frighten people off if they didn't know how much it's going to be to sort. Whereas if you know at the start, you can take it from there when you're moving forward with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that brings me on to the final part of that, which is what Charlotte's asking. If the EPC doesn't always add value, how do you determine the value of property? Which is the next bit of the home report.
Yeah, valuation at the end, and that's determined in residential properties on the comparative method. So you're looking for ideally a like-for-like property, same location, same condition, everything, and that will determine, you know, your market value. So it's based on rates per square meters of similar properties in the vicinity it's sold. So if you're looking at an ex-local authority, same detached house, you're looking for comparisons of a similar type, size of property, same location sort of thing. And you're looking for sales that have gone through in recent, you know, whether it's anywhere between 6 months, 12 months period. And then that way you can get your multiplier to apply it to your square meter. So that's pretty much what you're basing on as a comparative
What
method.
do you do when you have a unique property that you really can't You've not got any comparables, because it's easy to say, well, your house sold for 200,000, and guess what? The house next door sold for 200,000, and that 200,000. So guess what the value of your house is? It's 200,000. But what happens when you don't have that comparable? How do you work that out? Is that just a pie in the sky? It's like grab a figure out the air.
No, there's got to be that element of, you've got to back it up. As a valuation surveyor, we have got to back up our market value somewhere. If we were ever challenged on it, we would have to have evidence to say this is what we've based it on. So that is where it's someone who knows the locality and they're able to say, well, this one was unique, whether, say the East Nuke, for instance, if some unique property sold in Pitt and Weem, I'd be trying to say, well, is there a similar one in Dyke or Crail or St Monans? So you're looking for something in one of these sort of surrounding areas to say that's unique sort of thing. Whereas if it was someone who maybe didn't know the area, would say, oh, well, there's a high value one sold in St Andrews, I'll just use that as a comparison. You think, well,
I come to you quite a lot, and I came to you with that one in Strathkinnis recently, and we discussed it yesterday, and that was a unique proposition in comparison to a lot of other properties. So you do get these one-offs, don't you?
Yeah, there's always going to be one-offs. So you have to break it down to say, look, where can we value this part of the jigsaw, and bring it together to solve the whole puzzle sort of thing. But we need to have evidence there to say this is what we've based it on sort of thing. So, yes, it's much easier to value something where there's 10, 15 similar properties, that is what its value is. Whereas if you've got that unique property, that's when you have to sit there and really go through other comparisons, spread the net wider to say, look, we're looking at different things here, but still within that same locality sort of thing. Yeah. So you really need to have, you can't compare apples and pears sort of thing. You really need to try and get the same comparisons you're using to justify that market value.
Sometimes it's quite frustrating though, because it's almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because the seller has a different aspiration about what their house is worth. Do you often get that?
Yeah. There is. I mean, again, a seller always comes in.
It's all right, David. Nobody else is watching. You can tell.
No. Trying to manage that. What have you based that on? That's basically my question. What evidence have you based that figure on? Nothing. That's just what I want. I'm saying, well, to me, if I put that figure in the report and I have to go to court, that doesn't stand up. That's because the vendor wanted it. I need to break it down and say, look, here's number 246, whatever it is.
You need to be able to justify it. So.
Yeah, and it needs to be. Sometimes we do have to rein them back in to say, look, these are the sales evidence. Yeah. I can't do anything other than value on sales evidence sort of thing. So sometimes it does burst the vendor's bubble. But I think I need to do a job. I've got a duty of care to do to a potential purchaser, to a lender, to shepherds, to my own reputation sort of thing.
I find as well, it's even quite difficult as an estate agent to go into a property and you realise their aspirations are way beyond what the actual value is based on, because you know yourself, we do a similar process to what you're doing. In terms of the valuation, we do probably exactly the same thing, but you have a unique
same sales,
so we're using the same comparables and we're coming up with the same value, and I know exactly how you feel in that context. And sometimes you just have to you have to tell the truth, because for me personally, it comes back to bite you. The last thing you want to do is tell the customer it's worth this amount, and then actually try and get a surveyor to increase the home report to an amount which is going to price yourself out of the market, and then therefore that house is going to sit for ages, and all you're going to get is you have to reduce the price. You'll have to reduce the price because nobody bites at that level. And so the last thing I would want to do as an estate agent is go out and give someone false hope when that actually isn't there.
See, because that's the thing. If it sits in the market for, say, 3-6 months and you do price reductions, buyers nowadays look at that and think, oh, they need to sell or they need that. So sometimes
they look for a reason behind it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It doesn't help to try and overshoot it, sort of thing. It's sometimes better pitch at the right level. If we've got it wrong and the market says it's worth more, buyers will pay more, sort of thing, for it. But sometimes you find you're doing an injustice to the vendor to put it in too high and then drop, and then that's when you think, oh, there's a reason for this drop in. Let's go in there with a cheeky offer, and they might actually get less for it than what they could have got if they pitched it at the right level to start with, and it might have sold in a shorter time scale as well, sort of thing.
So, which ultimately brings me to Sarah's question: is how long does a home report actually last then?
Well, the valuation part only lasts for 12 weeks from the date of inspection. Now, that's the lenders that have stipulated that is the cut-off point. So even if it's 1 day over the 12-week period, the lenders won't accept it. Now, again, that's not us. That's the lenders that have decided that. But the actual home report, there's no shelf life in that. So the condition of your property, it should just be general wear and tear. So if a home report's 12 months old, there shouldn't be a major difference in the condition of the property unless some of the defects have worsened. But normally you'll find there's no shelf life to the actual home report. The only shelf life is the market value, which is 12 weeks. And what would normally happen, if it's a cash purchaser, they may not want it updated. If there is a lender involved, they want an updated home report carried out. So whether it's 12 weeks in a day or 6 months down the line, normally you just have one updated home report carried out. And by that stage, you've got under offer. So it's one of the things that you really need that to get over the line with the lender.
There's a common misconception, isn't there? And some I've heard some of my sellers say before, I'll have to get refreshed after 3 months, and it's like, well, no. You actually get your home report refreshed if you go beyond 3 months at the point when you get an accepted offer, and you don't do it before then, because then you'll continually be getting a refresh and a refresh and a refresh. If that's the case, if it does sit that long. Although I've not had a property sit that long. But that's the rule of thumb. You get it at the point of, when you actually get an accepted offer on the house. And if you get it before the 3 months, then your quid's in.
Yeah, that's it. So worst case scenario, you should really have the original home report and then one updated home report just before it sort of settles, sort of thing. Whereas right at the start of the process, some people were instructing us every 3 months, for an update. I think that's that's not what we need to do, sort of thing. So I think most buyers now, or most sellers, are more savvy, sort of thing, and say, look, we'll get the original done and just one more right at the end of the process if it goes out of date.
Okay, great stuff. So this then takes me, we've got the home report finalised, we've got all the questions asked. So this then takes me to property market update. So I'm going to bring in Anne-Marie here. Anne-Marie is from the Cooper office, and she deals with the East Neuk and Cooper and St Andrews area. So we'll bring the Anne-Marie on. So Anne-Marie, you want to give us a wee property update? I think you've got statistics to talk about the number of transactions sold, number of transactions instructed in an area, a number of sales. And so do you want to give us that information?
So if you take the last 2 months, for example, we've had in the Cooper area, we've had 101 new instructions, but the sales agreed were actually 132. Okay. The East Neuk, exactly. East Neuk, 55 new instructions, 49 sales agreed. So, and new instructions in St Andrews were 77, and we agreed 82 sales agreed. So
that's interesting.
What is that? That ultimately tells us that demand is outstripping supply. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So,
So what happened to this property crash?
Exactly.
No, we're still waiting.
Listen, I'll tell you what. If you talk about it long enough, at some point in time, you'll be right. And there is pundits out there, before this, it said it's all going to be on its knees, and yet evidence right in front of us now suggests that is not the case.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're getting so what we're telling ourselves then, if you're selling your house, now is the time to probably put your house on, because there is more than sufficient demand to actually get the right prices, if not more.
Yes.
Have you seen? What have you seen? How have you seen prices then in the area? I mean, what are you seeing?
Well, in the area, I'm seeing properties being sold over the asking price.
How much over?
Between 5 and 10%. I mean, it's very rare for a property.
And what does that equate to in monetary value sometimes?
You're talking like 20,000 over sometimes.
Really?
We've had 40,000 pounds over the asking price in a few cases.
That's amazing.
40,000.
That's amazing. Is that what area is that that's happening?
East Neuk, actually. That's the first place I can think of, actually. Yeah, because I'm thinking of a particular property. There's a couple of them actually. East Neuk and Cooper.
Yeah, we've seen it in St Andrews as well then.
St Andrews, yes, but I'd say East Nuke is getting really popular.
Do you think? Do you think there's an often common misconception about some areas? Is, I personally get this sometimes, and maybe you've heard this as well, Richard and David, in St Andrews area, where it's often said it's like, well, it's St Andrews that will sell itself, and it's like, well, okay. And my response to that is personally, if it's St Andrews and it will sell itself, why on earth has every other stage and got their houses still on the market after all this time?
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And then people say, "Oh, sell itself." Okay, St Andrews is a market on its own. Do you know what I mean? Then, I do hear that quite a lot.
Yeah.
What about the statement as well? It will sell quickly. You know, do you get that as well?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, it will sell quickly. But that's all hypothetical, and the figures are actually here when it comes to Cooper and the East Nuke. I would say would be. St Andrews. Yeah, definitely. Everyone wants to live there, but the most popular area for me would be the East Nuke, and that's probably because people.
What's your thoughts on that, David? What are you thinking? Is that a surprise to you to hear these numbers?
I'm biased. I live in Pittenweem, but this is a great place. It doesn't surprise me. But no, I'm not surprised really to hear those kind of figures. St Andrews is obviously a very desirable location, but you pay more for that, so it's maybe out with the reach of a lot of people, sort of thing, to buy a property in that area. Whereas East Nuke, Cooper, it's more attainable sort of thing to get a property. We'll go back to a lot of people working from home as opposed to an office these days. So, you're finding people are coming out to city centres from a 2-3 bed flat. You can get a 4-bed detached house in East Nuke for the same sort of money. You can have one of the bedrooms a dedicated home office. You've got lovely, whether it's walks, the beaches, golf, whatever's on your doorstep. So I'm not surprised people are moving like that. And borrowing just now is so cheap that a lot of people, if this is the time to move up the property ladder, now is the time. That's why you'll find that that there's more buyers out there than sellers, sort of thing.
I always take the example that you can get a 2-bedroom flat in Merchant City for £380,000. Look what you can get in East Nuke.
Yeah.
So, and does lockdown really need to determine where you stay now? Because you're in your house now and you work from home, and as Google and Amazon and Facebook and all these big corporations, the banks as well, are all pushing their staff out to work from home more and more and more. Why on earth would you want to live in an area that you really don't like that much, and you only live there because you have to get to your work physically, whereas you could live across the other side of the country and actually live in an idyllic area with golden sandy beaches, crystal clear waters, and a microclimate that'll blow anybody away in terms of the sun and the sea and the sand. And then when you take a break from your lunch, it's like, I'll just go down the beach for 5 minutes and then I'll just walk back into my house and start work again.
Yeah, absolutely. You can live anywhere now.
Yeah.
And do you find that with the Cooper market as well, Anne-Marie? What are you finding with the Cooper market in general?
The Cooper market in general, I would say, it's the demand is there. The properties.
You've just done fantastic deals on the St Michael's Church, haven't you?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
It's going like that. We've only got 2 left. And those as well. I don't think those 2 are going to last much longer either.
I've got to admit, I saw the windows the other day. They've now finally gone in, and that building is so iconic.
Yeah,
it is absolutely beautiful. Have you seen it yet, David, with the windows in?
I've not been in it yet. I've not been lucky enough to survey it yet. So hopefully we can get in there sometime and have a look around about it.
It's absolutely beautiful, the building. Yeah. And in general, I think the Cooper market and property market is obviously thriving.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's not that far from St Andrews either, because there's quite a few people that are looking for properties. They work in the university or they work in St Andrews, but because it's a little bit more expensive, Cooper is actually the next best place because it's got the train link and and everything, and it's not actually that far. 20-minute drive into St Andrews. So
it's the same thing with the rentals. The commute is it's hardly anything, and the price difference is.
Yes.
Great stuff. Okay, thanks very much for your property update, Anne-Marie.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate that, and we'll see you later on.
See you later.
Yeah, guys, that's absolutely amazing. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring Sam Green in. So Sam's from the Leaven office, and he covers Glenrothes, Kirkcaldy and Leaven. So he's going to talk about the property market in Leaven first of all. So yeah, Sam, how are you?
Good morning, very well, thank you. Saturday morning, it's a bit grey outside, but glad to be here. Thanks for having me. It's interesting what you were saying there, actually, Jim. I was just thinking about that. A couple of years ago, I sold a 2-bedroom flat in the Dean Village in Edinburgh for £600,000. There's not very many places in Fife that you won't get a mansion for that. So it's and it just goes to show you where the market is going now and how things are changing. I mean, like you said, everything's online now, isn't it? It's
so how about the Leaven property market? What's happening there, and what's all the exciting things happening in Leaven?
Similar to Anne-Marie and what she was saying, I mean, the numbers are actually quite staggering. I mean, from this year versus last year, the last couple of months, I mean, in Leaven as an area, there's been almost 120 instructions, but there's been over 130 sales, which means you're looking at a percentage of about 110% sales to instructions. It just shows you that there's too much of a demand and not enough supply. There are too many people wanting to buy and not enough properties to buy.
So the suggestion to everybody is, if you're going to sell, you should be selling now. And
this is what I've been saying to people when I've been meeting with them, not to put any pressure on them, but if you've even considered selling for a second, it's now. Now's the time to do it. This is where you're going to get, because I mean you can't forecast this again for however many years ahead of us. So it's got to be now. And that's across the board. I mean, it's the same in Glenrothes. 135 instructions versus 150 sales. It's 113% sale to instruction. It's quite impressive. And then if you look at it from the year previous, they've been around the 80%. You know, there's been 120 instructions, 99 sales, 107 instructions, 95 sales. It's all around the sort of 85 to 90% versus this year. And Kirkcaldy is staggering. Kirkcaldy market right now is absolutely staggering. There's been over 220 instructions in Kirkcaldy. It's obviously a really important. Yeah, it's quite impressive. And it's the only one actually this year that isn't in a sort of a positive deficit. So it's sitting at 99% sales to instructions. But
it's still stable. It's not the doom and gloom that everybody are painting, isn't it?
No way. I mean, the numbers just don't lie. It's as simple as that. If one thing we can always bank on is that the numbers are going to tell the true story, and it's not nearly what we thought it was going to be. You know, you look at the media and what people say that we're expecting a recession or a crash. The market is going to come to a standstill, and it's genuinely.
So do you think what's driving this is possibly the availability? We talked about this last week with Neil Bird from Cara Mortgages about. He said the COVID situation was the COVID versus credit crunch was. Credit crunch was there's no finance available. There was no credit available. The COVID situation, there's an abundance of cash that the banks are giving out. They're quite happy to more than freely give it. So that's one of the stimulants. And then David actually commented that interest rates are at a record low. And because we're furlough, and because the furlough has now been extended in some shape or form, people are quite well confident that they've still got their jobs, which makes unemployment levels actually still quite low in comparison. If you keep that where it is. I even heard Neil say last week that the lenders are actually taking into account furloughed income when actually assessing mortgages. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It's quite reassuring, I think, is the answer, especially certainly for the consumers, the people who are looking to buy, and that's clearly something that's being received as well because buyers are still buying. You know, it's not slowed down in the slightest. It's just maybe trying to reassure the people who are looking to sell. Like I said, I mean, the message is obviously out there loud and clear because one thing that we haven't experienced is a dip in buyers or interest. Inquiries are still absolutely rife at the moment. We're still getting them regularly, and as I said, it's maybe just trying to replace the stock now. For the properties that have been selling, we need to now try and replace them and get something in its place.
So, what's your thoughts on this, David?
What's that?
What's your thoughts on this overall? How the market's still beginning to boom, and how the transactions are still there?
Genuinely, I'm surprised how long the boom has lasted, sort of thing. But again, it's all driven out of unemployment. If you find unemployment rates are going up, sort of thing, you'll find people can't afford the bigger mortgages or moving up the tree or whatever sort of thing. So as long as that's kept at a equal level, it will tick away, sort of thing. I think genuinely, I can't see it ticking away at this pace. Traditionally, it gets a quieter time of year anyway, etc. You know, for coming in October, November, December, usually it is that wee bit time of the year. But I think the numbers are there as evidence to say that there's buyers out there. If you've got the right property, put on the market and it will sell, sort of thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if it sells for that 5-10% over market value, because people just want the right property just now coming up. So you are finding all areas, you know, whether it's St Andrews, Leavenmouth, Glenoffice, the numbers are there to say the demand from the buyers is out there. So as Sam said,
it's interesting you said though about the comment about the market traditionally goes quiet. Will you see that happening, Sam? Do you think that's going to happen? The market will traditionally go quiet. I mean, the fact that everybody's been in lockdown for quite a long time, the move for circumstances. So they still, you know, do you still think it will continue to go on, and we'll see an unprecedented move actually in the property market as opposed to previous years?
It's a good question. It's a tricky one to predict, I think. You know, again, traditionally, like David was saying, traditionally it's quiet, but it's not quiet for any reason. In Christmas, New Year, people have got more important things. You know, and the people who maybe weren't as interested anyway have got more important things to worry about. What those times of year do is they identify the pedigree buyers, the buyers that were always ready to buy anyway, who doesn't matter what day or time of year it is, they're in a position to purchase. I think that process has started a lot earlier this year because of COVID. So now these pedigree buyers have been identified months ago. And as a result of that, we've now been seeing them for a long time. And that's why we're getting, a lot of situations, properties will sell no matter what they are or because of what they are. But I'm told before now, a lot of people, it would be a question of, will my property sell? Now, when we're going out, it's more, my property is going to sell. How much is it going to sell for? How much over is it going to sell for? And that's kind of been the case now for 2, 3, 4 months. And I think that's what's going to slow down. I don't think the market's going to slow down too much, to be honest. I just think it's going to stop being as wildly over the sales values. I still think property's going to sell off the shelf. I just think maybe that's going to tame itself a little bit from. I mean, we've had. I can remember 2 in the last month that we've had between 20 and 40 grand over home report value in the Leavenmouth market. That's
unbelievable.
In the Leavenmouth market, that's wild. You can buy a flat in the Leavenmouth market for 40 grand. Never mind 40 grand over. So I think that'll be maybe what sort of slows down a little bit. I do believe that through the Christmas period, it's going to continue to be a very buoyant market.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks very much for your comments, Sam. I really appreciate that. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Okay, so what do you think of that then, David? 40 grand over and leaving. 30 grand over and leaving. Wow.
It's the thing is, that doesn't surprise me, just the way other figures I'm hearing, sort of thing, that people are paying over the market value to secure. I think it all comes back to people's lifestyle outlook, and life has changed in that last 3-month period. So now they're saying, if this is the right property for me, let's just throw everything at it to secure it. And you find that's what's sort of driving it, I think. So as long as the borrowing stays at a reasonably lower level, people will be.
Which it will. There's no way interest rates are going to go up. That's never going to happen. In fact, I actually got some comment from Europe, so actually saying that interest rates might actually go into negative, potentially. So, I can't see my mortgage company actually giving me money back. but that'll be quite simple. Some actually people have they've got to pay at least £1 to their mortgage. I mean, I saw that in the credit crunch where some people had to pay £1 towards their mortgage. That was the minimum amount they could get away with, even though they were in negative interest rates. So that kind of brings me on to investment strategies as well, because you're not really getting a return on your capital, are you, Richard, anymore? Banks are just not providing it.
No. I mean, I think when you look at investment strategies and things, I think a lot of landlords and buy-to-let investors are still on the fence. I mean, there's a lot out there that are kind of they're scared or uncertain about obviously how things are going to go, and I think that really they need to be using this opportunity to pick up property, especially with interest rates and what's been offered by lenders at the moment for buy-to-let investment opportunities. Because the lettings as well, we're in this demand outweighs supply, so we really need more on the market to meet that demand.
What blew me away is when I went out to see a customer during the week, this week actually, and they spoke about their property, which was worth 260,000, and they said they didn't have a mortgage, but they were considering renting it as well. Now, I'd obviously come to you to give me a rental value on it of £950. I mean, really, that's a gross yield of just over 4% a year. I mean, that's nothing really to write home about in terms of gross yield and rental return. And then when I looked at that, when you took into account, now let's assume full occupancy there for the relevance of the numbers, but if you've got that, then here we are. And 30% for overheads off your top line income, because that's things like if you've got somebody managing the property and you need to put away a wee bit of money for repairs ongoing in the years. So you're coming out around about an £8,000, net return. So £8,000 a year net return on a £260,000 investment. It doesn't really float my boat. No. Now, as an investor, I actually thought I broke into a wee mini seminar, as I do.
You do.
So I gave her a seminar in the house, and I talked about what else you could do with that money. Now I said, look, I tell you what, if you don't put all your eggs in one basket and you sell, and you realise there's 260,000 in capital, then do you realise if you look at other areas, for example, I think Cooper, probably the average price of a property in Cooper is about, in a flat is about 90,000.
Yeah,
90,000, would that be about right?
80, 90,
So, and if you were able to set up a limited company, because that's the best structure you'd probably use just now, in my opinion. You need to take advice from an accountant to do that, to make sure that is the best for you, for your circumstances, if anybody's watching this. Then I thought, well, okay, if you're paying your 4% EDS, you have to pay 4% EDS just now anyway, don't you, David? It's additional dwelling supplement as a second homeowner, don't you? Yeah. So you have to pay 4% on that purchase. Definitely, that's gone. A 25% deposit down, 75% loan to value. Mortgage Works has given you a rate of 3.89% for 5 years.
For 5 years.
Now. Admittedly, their arrangement fee is £2,000, but if you take that into account, and you're renting these properties, I mean, a £90,000 property, would I be fair to say probably about £550 a month?
£550,
yeah. Personally, that's what I'm getting just now. I'm getting that just now on my property.
Yeah, with the ones I manage for you, yeah.
So if we're taking that into account and 550, and we put all these statistics into there, and we do that, and we could buy 10 properties potentially at 90,000. Okay, so we buy 10 properties at 90,000, and that net return actually comes out at 19,000 now instead of 8,000.
Yeah.
Your return on capital on what you've put in is 7%. And then I started to look, and I thought to myself, wait a minute, 19,000 passive income out of £260,000 investment. What happens if I change to a different area? Do you know that area I'm thinking about? Where would that be? Possibly Leaving?
Yeah.
So you look at Leavenmouth. Average price of a flat in Leaving, 60?
Yeah, 60,000. But
Okay.
You're talking about 450.
So let's look at Leaving then. So Leaving, 60,000 average price. We buy 15 properties now. Okay. So 15 properties, same criteria, same money at the end of the day. We're coming out with a bottom line income passive of 29,000 now. So I've taken the same money from 8,000, to 29,000 with the same money and leveraged the income. And that would give you a net return of 11% on the capital invested. Now, David, you had some comments on that, didn't you? About using different areas and what that would mean in terms of risk.
Yeah, I was going to say, obviously, as a risk, you don't want to put all your eggs in the one basket in one area, perhaps. Whereas if you start going to maybe a higher capital value area, say like of St Andrews or something, you wouldn't get that same return in there. So I suppose it's that element of trying to to manage the risk, to optimise.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? It's a balancing act.
Yeah,
Richard, I mean, is that what you're thinking? It's a balancing act. What you're thinking?
Yeah, I think, and if you're thinking about different areas, you need to kind of obviously make sure you're making the right choices and picking, like you say, obviously areas like St Andrews. It's going to be completely different for leaving. So yeah, you do need to manage that.
Yeah,
but in my opinion, when you think about the logic of this, if you've got one property and you've got all your eggs in one basket, and that one property goes down, you've lost your income. If you've got 15 properties or 10 properties, one goes down, you've still got 9 or 14 actually earning money on your behalf. So risk-wise, it's actually quite risk adverse to actually spread your risk over more properties.
Yeah,
I mean, it might. I was going to say it might take a bit more management, but it doesn't if you've got a managing agent. I mean, we do that all the time for investors, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and like you were going through your figures and things, and you've got that down a bit an art form, Jim, and it's amazing. And we've sat with investors and displayed that to them, and they're astounded at the difference in what they had in their head. I think a lot of them have got this tunnel vision, like I've got money in the bank, I'll buy a property with all the money in cash, and when we explain to them, look, well, there's a better way of doing this, and a better way to generate a different income. And they are generally astounded at how they can do that, and a lot of people just aren't aware that that's a strategy they could do.
Yeah, I mean, I literally had to close that woman's mouth once I
couldn't believe it
because she just sat there astounded at the fact that I could take 260,000, invest it into a vehicle which will actually generate a passive income of about 29,000 a year.
Yeah,
and she was blown away. It's like I'd never need to work again.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you do it right, it could work like that, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, investment strategy-wise, what would be your recommendations for someone? Would they be best to do that, or would it be best to do a mix?
I think this depends on each individual circumstances, I think. But I think that kind of strategy is the most efficient way to try and generate a better income for yourself. You've got the money in the bank. But then doing a mix is obviously, if it's right for the person, the individual, then yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that as well. And they would be best come and speak to someone that's actually done it before. Who would that be?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've got a lot of investors who come to me, and I do between myself and to yourself as well. Obviously, like I say, you've got that down to an art form on how to kind of execute that strategy. So yeah, to sit in front of an expert like yourself or myself, then definitely to get advice on how best to do that.
I mean, for myself, it's just buy, refurbish, rent, repeat.
Yeah.
Rinse and repeat, I call it.
Rinse and repeat.
Rinse and repeat. If you've got the formula down in an art form, it's just the same thing all the time. I've always said to every single investor, this is a numbers game at its core value. It is nothing other than numbers. It has got nothing to do with anything else other than numbers. If the numbers work, then the property and the location come into after that. It's all to do with the numbers, because cash is king at the end of the day. When it comes down to it, cash is the most important thing to generate your business. It's not capital appreciation, because you're not going to be able to do anything with that, because it only becomes tangible once you actually sell the property itself. And then once you sell the property, you just chop down the tree that bears the fruit.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. So what's your thoughts on that then?
On the but yeah, I think that obviously, like you're saying,
is it right for somebody just to say, oh well, I'll tell you what, I'll just get out now because the going's good, or do you think they should keep going? Or
I think they should keep going. I mean, there's a few landlords who've come to me and I'm just going to go, and you try and obviously explain to them the benefits, obviously keeping going with it. I mean, like you're saying, chopping down the tree that bears the fruit. Isn't really the way to go. But I think a lot of landlords are quite unsure and uncertain at the minute, which I've already said. But
there's James commenting now saying if rates go negative, it's even more important to get the money out and pump it into an asset.
Yes,
and that's when it comes back to, thanks for your comments, James. I really appreciate that. And that's when it comes back to an asset that actually makes you money rather than an asset that costs you money. Because we know, I personally look at things like a car that you buy is not an asset; it's a liability. I personally look at some houses that you buy actually as liabilities.
I need to make the right choice.
Yeah, I even have somebody talking to me about getting a holiday home on a site, a lodge site, and I said, but a lodge is actually a depreciating asset. You know, a lodge actually. I've never, David, have you ever seen a lodge actually went up in value in the area?
No, because there's a limited lifespan of the lodge. You know, the mortgage funding comes into that, you know, and everything. So, to me, a lodge is a lifestyle choice sort of thing. It's something you buy for your wanting, you know, use it weekends or holiday homes, whatever. But it's not something you buy to say in 10, 15 years time I'll sell it and make all this capital appreciation. You'll find, you know, each site's got its different rules, but you'll find sometimes, you know, there's a certain age of what it's to be before it's to be renewed and things like that. So again,
applications when it comes to the lodges and things.
Yeah, I thought that as well. I mean, really, it's your biggest assets and your biggest earners are in bricks and mortar. You know, I often say to people, you know, if you could show me something that generates more return and more money than bricks and mortar, tell me about that as well, and I'll do it as well. You know, that's the reality, because bricks and mortar is where it is, and because I've been doing this for more than 27 years, it's the knowledge that I've acquired over the years that makes me understand about the rinse and repeat cycle, and it becomes so clinical. I often sit in front of people and they're actually quite struck, they're awestruck about the fact that what I know, but it's not anything to do with what I know. It's the fact that they didn't realise that was available to them, and they didn't understand it. But I often take it for granted. I often just expect everybody knows that. You know, and it's and people look at me and I look at them and think, you're looking at me like I've got two heads. But the reality is, it's like, well, I just thought everybody knew that. I thought everybody knew how to do this. I thought everybody knew how to generate this type of income. And that's what I become surprised about property investment. How many people out there actually don't realise? But what I really become concerned about is how they run away to the first person that runs a course on property and says, I'm going to charge you £5,000 for a course. And they've actually got no knowledge at all. I call them furus. In other words, fake gurus. They don't have any track record. And actually, so Shaf Razul in the Sun newspaper, Shaft actually says he actually calls them furus as well. We were having this conversation about it, and we had said, let's coin the phrase furus, because often these people actually don't have a clue what they're talking about. I mean, is that your assessment, Richard? Do you come across that sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of investors who come to us, and a lot of the time they've been to these courses and things, and they're all psyched up, and they've got this, you know, they've got the drive, and but maybe not quite the right strategy in their head because they've not been taught it, obviously. So yeah, I know I see that quite a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's definitely unprecedented times we're going through. It's definitely a market that most people didn't predict was going to happen just now. You know, in terms of where we are, but there's a compelling evidence to suggest that this market will still continue to go as it is, and it's not going to be any different from before. So I'm for one. I actually wrote about this midway through lockdown, and actually put a report out to say that I actually just see a short-term blip. But I think towards the end of this year and towards the beginning of next year, the market will still continue to be quite buoyant. But it'll not be any dramatic swings. It'll just continue to be buoyant. I mean, is that kind of your final thoughts on this, David? I mean, what are you thinking?
I'd like to think so, and share your optimism in that. But again, to me, it's all.
I seem to be the only person that's quite optimistic about this.
No, I think the only thing that I'd be concerned with is, you know, job retentions and things like that sort of thing. You know, if people keep jobs, they'll keep the money coming in. They'll keep everything ticking over. But if that unemployment rate shoots up, it will have a knock-on effect, in my opinion, in the property market. So fingers crossed, kind of thing, that things will just tick away as they are. I think the paying the 10% over premiums and that long term, that's not sustainable. That's got to sort of slow down, sort of thing, and more get back to reality with where market values are. But as long as things, you know, sell for the right level and keep ticking over, that's all people need. So fingers crossed, kind of thing, that it ticks along, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, what's your final thoughts on this, Richard, and where we're going in the market?
Yeah, I know. I mean, the rental market is fairly across the board and throughout the years. obviously I've been doing this for 10 years, and it's kept quite stable, the rental market, and when the sales market hasn't been so great, the rental market's kept going. I think obviously with employment rates and things, always could have a big effect on the sales side, but not so much on the rental.
I'm thinking along the lines that even though unemployment, when you think about it, people have to move still for circumstances.
Yeah.
So if you tend to find if they've got a lot of equity built up in their property, then it shouldn't be an issue for them to move as a result. And then again, people say, well, but my property, I'm losing so much value. But you remember, the property you're buying has lost the value as well. So proportionally, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking as well, David? You know, I see you're nodding your head.
Again, it was the same with the 2008 credit crunch sort of thing, where people say that I've lost X number of pounds, but someone one year lost X number. It was like you said, that the movement is exactly the same sort of thing. It's just smaller numbers you were. Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest, and I've always said to everybody, I'll be open about this. When I first bought my house, the credit crunch came in and I lost 60 grand. But the reality is I've not lost anything because I've still got my house. I'm still in it just now. Mm-hmm. You know, it's neither here nor there, and now it's actually recovered, and I've not lost anything. But you've only lost it if you actually materialise it and sell the asset. That's the only difference. Mm-hmm. So if you making use of the asset and you're still earning money on the asset, you know, there's no reason. There's no reason to worry about it at all. I think we just generally get caught up in this negative thinking and this negative state of mind. You know, is that in consensus? Is that what we're I mean, the news out there just wants to pour bad news all the time and put negative into the market, and actually just sell papers, if that makes sense, or sell TV programs. That's really what it comes down to, isn't it?
Yeah, I think people fixate on things quite a lot as well, and it's like you were saying earlier about if you say something enough, it'll happen. I think that's kind of.
Yeah. But when you see the statistics that you've come up with in the last, 2 months sort of thing, and the sale price, it's probably never been more positive, the property market, yet we're still talking negative things up here sort of thing. So I think the statistics are showing that it's flying just now. So long may it continue, and see what happens.
I think that's my final thoughts as well. You know, the statistics show something completely different. And the demographics as well. So no matter what they say on the news, unless there's some compelling evidence to show otherwise, that's the only reason I would take that into account. So as a property owner or a property investor, property investment is a fantastic time to invest just now because of the availability of credit and interest rates being so low. And there's still a real good demand for rented accommodation and good returns on your capital as well. In terms of the housing market, in terms of moving in that, now's the time to move, because clearly there's a demonstration as well that the market's still buoyant and still going. And we're still continuing to build houses. We can see that. I mean, St. Monans themselves have announced, I think it's Lockheed Homes, possibly. Don't quote them on the name, but they've announced that they're going to be building 100 bungalows along there. And then you've got St. Andrews with Joe Heaton. I mean, he's 1,000 properties on the cards, and then you've got Cooper as well. Kirkcaldy, and then you've got Cooper as well on the across the road on the outskirts as you go out. That's now going to get developed as well. So there is really positive news on the horizons, and I think regardless of what the national news says, I think we should all take stock of the local market and actually focus on that before anything else, and actually use and keep that in our minds rather than actually thinking everything's going to go wrong.
I would agree.
Yeah. Okay, guys, I think that's it for today, and I think we've really covered every subject, and I look forward to seeing you all again tomorrow at 9:30. So for now, it's a bye for now.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you very much for inviting on.